Hey guys, Rob from Epic Dungeon Tiles, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make these cool little sandstone pieces of scatter terrain with some added bones in there. They turned out really cool, and they were to basically go with the Orc Watchtower build. So you can see like the kind of ground cover on there looks the same. Let me hold that up a little bit better. So you can see they like match in colour really nicely, and I'm probably going to build some additional things just to go along with it so that you've got a nice kind of selection of terrain in the sort of desert type scenario. Yeah, so it's pretty cool, and let's turn to the table and get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to use is these bases that I've built in other videos. Effectively, it's just a thin piece of MDF cut to shape, and then with PVA brushed on it with some sand on top. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut slithers of insulation foam or craft foam, fairly thick kind of foam, that we can cut into our little sandstone discs. And then once we've done that, we're going to make kind of fairly harsh cuts. We're not going to try and round the edges or anything like that, but just make quite harsh cuts, because that will give us a really nice texture for our dry brushing later on. So you can see I'm basically sort of cutting little wedges. And you probably need a lot more of these than you realise. So for one of these, you'll see how many I've got. I've got absolutely loads of them. And it's a good idea to kind of cut a couple down a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, because the stacking and the overhangs will just make it look even better. And if you've got any thin bits, like I had a bit of a thin bit there, so I just cut it off a little bit extra. You don't have to be too accurate with the shape. And then I just try and reuse a couple of bits, because I got a sort of weird end on the end of that one. You'll see how many I end up cutting just for this one piece. I sort of skipped ahead a bit, but all of those are for just this one. So you're going to be cutting a lot of these. So it's a good idea to not get too accurate with them, just cut them and then glue them on. If you've got a couple that are too thin or don't quite look right, just don't use them. Okay, so put a big amount of PVA glue on. We're going to be covering this with PVA and black paint, so you don't need to make sure it's that well covered, because they will get a second layer that keeps them together. And then just keep doing this. It's surprisingly satisfying just kind of putting a blob of glue on, then stacking them up. A lot more satisfying than cutting them out anyway. And then what I like to do is, when it gets towards the top, just do a little stack of kind of smaller ones. I think that gives a really nice effect. The other thing I've done here is put a small stack of those thin sheets next to it as well. And the next thing we're going to do, this adds quite a nice bit of strength to it, especially because of the amount of glue that we've put in the middle. So I just poke in some cocktail sticks to the small sections, and then I've got a barbecue skewer which I've just put a point into for the main big section, so I just put that all the way down through the middle. And if you angle these, that will help clamp them in a lot better. So I just put loads of these in, but you could probably get away with 2 or 3. And then just take a pair of clippers and just cut them to length. We're going to be adding a little bit of flock on top, so we can cover them up quite nicely as well. And then the other thing is to keep the foam, because what the foam likes to do on the PVA is it likes to kind of hover there. So I just clamp it down just to make sure it's flat between there's no sort of space between the foam and the board. So here's another one I did where I did a big section and then a small section, and I kind of put some across so that it was sort of had like a bit, like you can't fit a mini through it, but they'd be able to look through it and potentially kind of like dive to the side and things like that. So that looks pretty cool. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to mix up some black and PVA glue, Mod Podge. PVA glue or Mod Podge, whatever you've got available. I'll just mix up a load of this. You can see I mix it up a bit weird. I've got like my mixing palette thing, but it's not quite big enough to do enough. I should have got a bigger pot, but I use this one all the time and it cleans up really well. The other thing I find with using kind of PVA and things like that, it helps the paint spread a little bit easier. I'm not sure why, but you can see when I'm putting it on this sand, it just goes down really easy. Whereas without it, you have to really get it, like almost stipple it on to get it within that sand. And then just cover the whole thing in black. The next thing I do is cover it with a really light brown. It's almost kind of a tan colour. And then I dry brush the whole thing with a cream, a really light cream. You can see the difference here, it just brings out that detail, looks really nice now. And at the very top of the stones, I've dry brushed that white just to give it that kind of feel of darker shadows down the bottom. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add some flock. It's similar to the way I did the flock on the Orc Watchtower. And effectively I'm going to add a little bit on the top and then a little bit around the edges, but I'm not going to completely cover it. One interesting thing about this flock is it's actually flock that my dad made for me. He does some woodworking and stuff like that, and he had a load of sawdust left over, so he actually made them as well. So he made the colours and things like that. So I would show you kind of where you can get it, but it doesn't effectively exist anyway. But it's just yellowy kind of flock. Looks really good, especially for sand type terrain. It's great for hiding those like matchsticks and things like that. Yeah, and it helps just to break it up and add a little bit more detail. Even though it's a very similar colour, you kind of want that because you want it to look sandy and look like there's more to it. So the other thing I'm going to add is this kind of dead grass type tuft. You can see they look pretty cool. They really help to just break up that flat base. Now the final thing I'm doing is using these little plastic skeletons that I got from Tesco, and I'm just cutting up some different pieces so you can see them there, and then I'm going to paint them with the white bone colour. It's surprising, these little plastic pieces, once you've painted them and given them a wash, they look really good. But before you've done that, they look a bit rubbish. So here you go, you can see I've given them a wash. You can see I've got 2 sets of ribs and some various bones that I'm just going to stick down with this gel super glue. I just place them randomly. I try and place them kind of underneath so they're a little bit more hidden. I don't want them like that on the top or anything like that. So just in these crevices. So you can see there's the first one just lying on that slab. And it looks really good. It's kind of really well blended in, so unless you're really looking, you kind of don't really notice all that detail, but I quite like that sometimes. And here they are finished. They turned out awesome, and they're going to look really good with the Orc Watchtower. So I'm really pleased with them. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and don't forget to like and subscribe and comment below on any future builds you'd like to see me do. Also, I've made a little bit of progress, so here's a sneak peek at the vegetation tile. So there's one of them with sort of like the tree trunk and some vegetation, a few rocks and things like that. So I'm going to finish painting them. They've just got a layer on at the moment. They haven't got any sort of dry brushing or anything like that. Thanks for watching, guys, and hopefully we'll be able to continue creating craft tutorials every week.